Kieran never wanted to be a thief. It was simply the only life he had ever known. Orphaned at a young age, he had grown up in the grimy streets of Anderfall, where survival meant quick fingers and an even quicker wit. By 25, Kieran was notorious among the city guards for his uncanny ability to slip away, his pockets lined with stolen goods. But tonight, the streets offered nothing, and desperation drove him to the forest, an unfamiliar, untamed wilderness. He trudged through the underbrush, his boots crunching softly against fallen leaves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest darkened, shadows stretching like ghostly fingers. He was about to turn back when a piercing scream froze him in his tracks. The sound wasn't human, not entirely. It was something else, something otherworldly. Kieran's pulse quickened. He debated ignoring it, but his curiosity and a flicker of humanity urged him forward. The scream led him to a small clearing illuminated by the faint light of the rising moon. A human hunter loomed over a fallen figure. The man's rough leather armor and cruel sneer marked him as someone used to taking lives without a second thought. On the ground lay an elf woman, her silver hair cascading like a river of light, her emerald cloak torn and blood-stained. "You should have stayed in your woods," the hunter growled, his bow drawn, an arrow ready to end her life. Kieran didn't think, he acted. Years of survival had honed his instincts. He rushed forward, crashing into the hunter and sending them both tumbling to the ground. The bow skittered away as the two men wrestled. Though wiry, Kieran was faster, slipping a knife from his boot and striking the hunter's temple with the hilt. The man slumped unconscious. Panting, Kieran turned to the elf. She was clutching her leg, blood seeping between her fingers. Her violet eyes, vibrant even in the dim light, locked onto his. "Are you going to finish me off too?" she asked, her voice trembling but defiant. Kieran shook his head. "I'm no hunter. Let me help you." Her gaze softened, though suspicion lingered. "I don't have much choice." Kieran knelt beside her, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind her wound. He noticed the intricate embroidery on her cloak and the faint glow of a pendant around her neck. Whoever she wasn't just any elf. "What's your name?" he asked as he worked. "Lasara," she replied. "And yours?" "Kieran," he said simply, focusing on tying the makeshift bandage. "We need to move. He'll wake up soon, and I'm not keen on sticking around to find out if he has friends." Despite her injury, Lasara managed to stand with Kieran's help. Together, they ventured deeper into the woods, leaving the hunter behind. Over the following days, Kieran stayed with Lasara. She couldn't walk far, and though he felt the pull of the city and its dangers, he couldn't abandon her. He hunted small game, using skills he had learned in his rough upbringing, and she showed him which plants were safe to eat. As they traveled, Lasara spoke of her mission. She was a guardian of the forest, one of the few remaining elves tasked with protecting its ancient secrets. Poachers and hunters had been encroaching on her lands, killing creatures and felling sacred trees. She had been tracking a group of them when the hunter ambushed her. "You risk your life for trees and animals?" Kieran asked one night as they sat by a small fire. Lasara's eyes flashed. "The forest is more than trees and animals. It's a living thing, a sanctuary. Without it, the world would wither." Kieran fell silent, ashamed of his ignorance. His world had been limited to narrow alleys and stolen meals. He couldn't fathom such devotion to something so grand. Yet, he found himself drawn to her passion. In return, Lasara grew curious about Kieran's life. She asked about the city, about the people he had stolen from. He spoke hesitantly at first, but her gentle questions coaxed out his story. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," he said one evening. "But when you're starving, morality takes a back seat." "You've saved me," Lasara said softly. "Whatever you've done in the past, it doesn't define you." Their bond was tested when the poachers returned in force. Lasara, though wounded, refused to leave the forest. "I won't abandon my home," she insisted. Kieran knew nothing of bows or magic, but he knew strategy. Using his streetwise cunning, he set traps and led the poachers into ambushes. Together, he and Lasara drove them back, her magic weaving illusions that turned the forest into an impassable labyrinth. In the midst of danger, Kieran realized he cared for Lasara deeply. Her strength and conviction inspired him, and he found himself wanting to be better. Not for survival, but for her. When the last poacher fled, leaving the forest in peace, Kieran and Lasara returned to the glade where they had first met. The hunter's bow still lay forgotten, overgrown with moss. Lasara's leg had healed, and she stood tall, her silver hair shimmering in the sunlight. Kieran couldn't take his eyes off her. "I think I've finally found something worth fighting for," he said, his voice rough but earnest. Lasara smiled, her violet eyes warm. "And I found someone worth trusting." As they stood together, the forest seemed to embrace them, the trees whispering approval. Their love, born in struggle and nurtured by shared purpose, became as unyielding as the ancient woods around them. Kieran, the thief who had once taken from others to survive, had found a new life, a life of giving, of protecting, and of love.